The dimly lit restaurant buzzed with conversations and clinking cutlery. I tried to focus on the menu, but my mind kept drifting back to the tension in the air. My mother-in-law, Veronica, had been throwing passive-aggressive jabs all evening, and I could feel the storm brewing. "A broke, fatherless girl like you?" Veronica hissed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "My son deserves better." Paul's face reddened with embarrassment as he rushed to my defense. "Mom! Stop it! You know nothing about her." I felt a familiar lump forming in my throat, but before I could respond, my mother Helen spoke up calmly. "Mark my words, you'll regret this." Veronica scoffed, but her smug expression faltered slightly. I squeezed Paul's hand under the table, silently thanking him for his unwavering support. As the evening dragged on, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me here. Growing up, my father had squandered our savings before abandoning us, leaving my mother to pick up the pieces. She worked tirelessly, juggling menial jobs during the day and studying at night, determined to build a better life for us. I pitched in as soon as I could, working part-time jobs after middle school to help make ends meet. It wasn't easy, but my mother's resilience inspired me to keep pushing forward. I earned my GED, then a college degree, eventually becoming a respected accountant. That's when I met Paul. We clicked immediately, bonding over our shared values of hard work and mutual respect. But his parents, Veronica and Robert, were a constant source of tension, trying to control every aspect of our relationship. As we left the restaurant, I felt Paul's arm wrap protectively around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "You didn't deserve any of that." I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with determination. "It's okay. We'll get through this together." Because no matter what Veronica threw our way, I knew one thing for certain: our love was worth fighting for. As I walked home from that disastrous dinner, memories of my childhood came flooding back. Growing up, my father's reckless decisions had left us teetering on the edge of financial ruin. I still vividly remember the day he gathered my mother and me in the living room, a suitcase by his side. "I've made some bad choices," he admitted, unable to meet our eyes. "The money's gone." My mother's face drained of color, but she remained composed, ushering me out of the room. That night, I overheard her anguished sobs through the thin walls of our apartment. Just like that, my carefree childhood evaporated. My mother poured herself into work, taking on multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads. I'd come home from school to find her hunched over textbooks, studying for her GED between shifts. "We'll get through this," she'd reassure me, her eyes weary but determined. As soon as I was old enough, I started working part-time jobs too, contributing whatever I could to our meager income. It wasn't easy, but my mother's unwavering resilience inspired me to keep going. After countless late nights and sacrifices, she finally scraped together enough funds to start her own business. I remember the pride in her eyes as she handed me the keys to our new office space. "This is just the beginning," she promised, pulling me into a fierce hug. From that moment on, our fortunes began to shift. I buckled down, earning my GED and eventually a college degree. My hard work paid off when I landed a coveted position at a prestigious accounting firm. But even as my professional life flourished, the scars of my childhood lingered. Veronica's cruel words had ripped open those old wounds, reminding me of how far we'd come, and how much further we still had to go. As I crawled into bed that night, my mind whirled with 1,000 thoughts. But one thing was certain: I wouldn't let Veronica's toxic behavior tear apart the life Paul and I had built together. Not after everything my mother had sacrificed to give me a fighting chance. I first met Paul at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charming and funny, and we immediately hit it off. As we exchanged numbers, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Little did I know that fateful meeting would change the course of my life forever. In the early days of our relationship, everything seemed perfect. Paul treated me with respect and admiration, never once making me feel inferior for my humble beginnings. He celebrated my achievements, encouraging me to chase my dreams without restraint. But as time passed, the cracks began to show. Paul's parents, Veronica and Robert, made no effort to hide their disdain for me. Veronica, in particular, took every opportunity to belittle my accomplishments, dismissing my hard-earned success as a mere fluke. A girl like you could never amount to anything without riding on someone else's coattails, she sneered during one tense family gathering. Paul tried to reason with her, but Veronica was relentless. Don't be naive, son. She's using you to climb the social ladder. I bit my tongue, fighting back tears of humiliation. Paul squeezed my hand reassuringly, but I could see the strain in his eyes. The constant judgment and criticism took a toll on our once unbreakable bond. Arguments erupted over the smallest things, and I found myself questioning whether Veronica was right. Was I really good enough for her son? Of course you are. Paul insisted whenever I voiced my doubts. My parents are just stuck in their outdated ways. They'll come around eventually. But Veronica's interference only intensified. She'd show up unannounced at my office, berating me in front of my colleagues until Paul arrived to whisk her away. I'm so sorry, he'd apologize profusely, his face flushed with embarrassment. She's completely out of line. Yet her behavior continued unchecked, driving a wedge between us. I knew Paul loved me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his loyalty was divided. As much as he tried to shield me from his parents' toxicity, their disapproval cast a dark cloud over our relationship. Something had to give. Either Paul put his foot down, or I walked away. Because as much as I loved him, I refused to spend my life being disrespected and degraded by his family. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when the storm clouds rolled in once again. I was knee-deep in paperwork at my office when the receptionist buzzed me. "Jane, your mother-in-law is here to see you," she said hesitantly. I felt my heart drop. Not here, not now. Before I could respond, the door swung open, and there stood Veronica, lips pursed in disdain. "Hello, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought we could have a little chat." My colleagues exchanged nervous glances as Veronica strode in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I steeled myself, determined not to let her get under my skin. "What can I do for you, Veronica?" I asked coolly. Her eyes narrowed as she looked me up and down. "I must say, I'm surprised you've managed to fool everyone here with your little act." I bristled at her condescending tone. "Excuse me?" "Oh, please," she scoffed. "A broke, fatherless girl like you? This whole career is just a fluke. You'll never truly belong in this world." My cheeks burned with humiliation as my coworkers shifted uncomfortably. Before I could respond, Paul burst through the door, his face flushed with anger. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" he demanded, rushing to my side. Veronica waved her hand dismissively. "Just having a friendly chat with your girlfriend, dear. No need to get upset." "This needs to stop," Paul said through gritted teeth. "You can't keep ambushing Jane like this." "I'm only looking out for you," Veronica insisted, her gaze landing on me with thinly veiled disgust. "You deserve so much better than this." That was the final straw. I felt a fire ignite within me, burning away years of insecurity and self-doubt. Enough was enough. "You're right, Veronica," I said evenly, meeting her gaze head-on. "I did come from humble beginnings, but that's made me stronger, more resilient, and I've worked my ass off to get where I am today." Paul watched me with a mixture of shock and admiration as I stepped forward, towering over his diminutive mother. "So you can insult me all you want," I continued, my voice steady and unwavering. "But I'm not going anywhere. This is my life, my career, and if you can't accept that, then you're the one who doesn't belong here." Veronica opened her mouth to retort, but I cut her off. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." With that, I turned on my heel and strode back to my desk, leaving a stunned silence in my wake. The weeks following my confrontation with Veronica were a whirlwind. My newfound confidence empowered me, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. No longer would I allow her toxicity to dictate my life. Paul was in awe of my resilience, and our relationship grew stronger than ever before. One crisp autumn evening, he surprised me with a candlelit dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. "Jane," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "you've shown me what true strength and courage look like. I don't know where I'd be without you." I felt my cheeks flush as he drew a small velvet box from his pocket. My heart raced as he opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his eyes shining with love and admiration. Tears of joy stung my eyes as I nodded fervently. "Yes, of course." In that moment, everything else melted away. Veronica's venom, the years of insecurity, all of it. All that mattered was the man before me, pledging his unwavering support against the world. The following day, I excitedly shared the news with my mother over brunch. After hugging me fiercely, she pulled back, her expression turning serious. "Jane, I know how difficult Veronica has made things for you," she said gently, "but you're stronger than she'll ever be." I nodded, emboldened by her steadfast belief in me. "In fact," she continued, "I think it's time you considered branching out on your own." My brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Start your own consulting firm," she explained. "I have extra office space in my building that you can use. It'll give you the freedom to thrive without anyone holding you back." The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating, but as I mulled it over, I knew she was right. No more playing by others' rules. It was time to pave my own path. "I'll do it," I said resolutely. "No more letting Veronica dictate my future." My mother beamed with pride, and together we began mapping out plans for my burgeoning business venture. With Paul's unconditional love and support, I felt unstoppable. Yet even as we immersed ourselves in wedding planning and career strategizing, I couldn't ignore the looming confrontation on the horizon. Sooner or later, we'd have to break the news to Veronica and Robert, and I had a sinking feeling their reaction wouldn't be pretty. But this time I was ready. Bolstered by my mother's guidance and Paul's devotion, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Because in the end, nothing would stop me from claiming the life and the future I deserved. The evening we revealed our engagement to Paul's parents was tense from the start. As we arrived at their lavish home, Veronica and Robert greeted us with tight smiles, eyeing my modest ring with barely concealed disdain. "Well, isn't this quaint?" Veronica remarked, her lips pursed. Paul shot her a warning look, but I could see the worry etched across his features. Still, I refused to let her ruin this special moment. Over an uncomfortably silent dinner, Veronica kept shooting me pointed glances as if sizing me up. Finally, she cleared her throat. "So, Jane," she began, her tone sickly sweet, "I must admit, I'm curious about your background." My grip tightened on my fork as Paul tensed beside me. "Mom, don't start." "What?" She feigned innocence. "Surely a woman of your circumstances has an interesting story." Reaching into her purse, she produced a thin manila folder, sliding it across the table with a triumphant smirk. "Allow me to fill in the blanks," she said, opening the file to reveal a stack of documents. "It seems your dear mother spent quite some time living on the streets before her supposed business success." My heart pounded in my ears as she extracted a grainy photograph, my mother haggard and thin, clutching a tattered blanket. "A homeless woman having a legitimate business?" Veronica laughed derisively. "What a joke." White-hot fury coursed through my veins, but before I could respond, my mother's calm voice cut through the tension. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she said, rising from her seat. "This bickering ends now." Veronica's laughter died in her throat as my mother fixed her with a steely glare. "Your husband's company relied heavily on my contracts," she stated matter-of-factly. "Contracts I terminated weeks ago, after your deplorable behavior." Robert paled, his fork clattering to his plate. Veronica opened her mouth, but my mother held up a hand, silencing her. "I'm taking control of this situation," she said firmly. "And if you know what's good for you, you'll cooperate." As Robert and Veronica exchanged panicked looks, I felt a surge of pride for my mother's unwavering strength. The tables had finally turned. In the days following our disastrous dinner, the fallout from my mother's power play became abundantly clear. Robert's company hemorrhaged clients and contracts, plunging into financial chaos. "This is insanity," Veronica raged when Paul and I paid them a visit. "You can't just destroy everything we've built." My mother, ever the picture of calm, merely arched an eyebrow. "I'm afraid you brought this on yourselves. Now, shall we discuss terms for reconciliation?" Robert, his usual bluster deflated, nodded weakly. With a curt gesture, my mother's lawyers unfurled a thick stack of documents. "First, you will issue a public apology for your unconscionable behavior towards my daughter," she stated. "Every detail, leaving nothing out." Veronica opened her mouth, no doubt to protest, but my mother silenced her with a look. "Furthermore, you will sign over the deed to your home," she continued, sliding a contract across the table, transferring full ownership to Jane. The blood drained from Veronica's face as she sputtered in outrage. You can't be serious. That house has been in Robert's family for generations. Then you should have thought twice before attacking his future family, my mother replied coolly. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. An agonizing silence stretched between us as Veronica and Robert digested the reality of their situation. Finally, it was Paul who broke the standoff. Just do it, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. You've done enough damage. Veronica whirled on him, eyes blazing. How dare you take their side, after everything we've sacrificed for you? But Paul held firm, his expression resolute. No, Mom. You've only ever thought about yourselves. This is the consequence of your actions. With shaking hands, Robert signed the documents, officially ceding his prized estate. As the lawyers hustled to make copies, Veronica slumped in her chair, tears of impotent rage streaking her cheeks. It was a hollow victory. Part of me ached for the broken family before me. But they had brought this reckoning upon themselves. If severing ties was the only way to protect my future with Paul, then so be it. As we prepared to leave, my mother rested a hand on my arm. You've been through so much, she murmured, but your strength has never wavered. I'm proud of you. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat, nodding mutely, because in that moment, basking in her pride and Paul's unwavering devotion, I knew our struggle had been worth it. We were finally free. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. With Robert's company crumbling under the weight of lost contracts, a mass exodus of employees flocked to my mother's firm. Some sought her out, humbled by her unbridled success. Others hoped to distance themselves from the stain of Robert's failure. As for Robert and Veronica, their fortunes took a nosedive. The harsh reality of my mother's terms set in. Not only had they lost their home, but their social standing too. Whispers of their downfall rippled through our city's elite circles, and suddenly the invitations dried up. Part of me pitied them, cast out and disgraced, but the sting of Veronica's cruelty lingered, tempering any sympathy. This was the consequence of their own making. On a brighter note, my fledgling consulting firm flourished under my mother's guidance. With a steady stream of clients and the office space to expand, I finally felt in control of my own destiny. No longer would I let others dictate my value. Then, one crisp autumn day, Paul took me by surprise with a picnic in the park, the same place where we'd shared our first date years ago. As we lounged on the checkered blanket, savoring the warmth of the sun, he reached across and took my hands in his. Jane, he began, his eyes brimming with adoration. This journey hasn't been easy, but you've handled it with more grace than I could have imagined. Your strength and resilience inspire me every day. Tears pricked my eyes as he placed a tender kiss on my knuckles. Which is why I think this is the perfect time to finally make it official, he continued, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. I gasped as he opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring, the same one he'd proposed with, now emblazoned with extra embellishments. Jane Warren, will you marry me? For real this time? A laugh bubbled up through my happy tears as I nodded fervently. Yes, of course. Our small ceremony was intimate yet joyous, surrounded by our dearest friends and my mother, who beamed with pride. As Paul and I exchanged vows, my heart swelled, not with arrogance or conceit, but pure, unbridled love for this man who had stayed by my side through everything. In the days after our wedding, a quiet sense of peace washed over me. The turmoil of the past year had faded, replaced by a thrilling new chapter on the horizon. So when the telltale signs of morning sickness kicked in, it took me by surprise at first. But as the realization sank in, Paul and I were going to have a baby. A fresh wave of joy enveloped me. I could scarcely wait to share the news with him over a celebratory dinner. Because with our toxic ties finally severed, we were free to build the life we'd always dreamed of. A life filled with love, laughter, and unconditional support. Our future shone bright, unencumbered by Veronica's poisonous presence, and this time, nothing would dim that light.